Hello and welcome back to episode 16 of the 4 Out 1 In podcast with your host, George Hamilton III.
And Carlos Costas.
How you been, bro?
Man, it feels good to be back, I'll tell you that much. It's been a minute since me and you have recorded. I'm excited to finally talk about basketball. Season's a couple weeks away, and I'm just ready to get back to it. How you been?
Been good. It's been a long time, as you said, about 2 months? I mean, we've both been busy through the summer, so we have our own schedules and all of that. But I mean, even though we didn't podcast through the summer, we still talked hoops. And I'm just glad to be back in the swing of things, man.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, as you know, a lot has happened in the off season, and so I guess we can just get right into the swing of things with the NBA GM survey, which happened, I want to say, last week. And I'm going to share my screen. Dun, dun, dun. All right. Do you see me, or is it just me?
No,
or is it just the screen?
Yeah, we're good.
All right. So, I mean, just to run through things, the NBA GMs did a survey of basically everything that's going to, all of the big topics that are going to happen in the NBA season. And so we're just going to run through these and give our takes and opinions on them. And so we'll start off with the first question, which which team will win the 2023 NBA Finals? 43% of the NBA GM said the Milwaukee Bucks. 25% of the GM said the Golden State Warriors would go back to back. 21% of the GM said the Clippers would win the title, and 11% of the GM said Boston is going to win the title. Last year was 72%. What are your thoughts on these ratings, or these percentages?
I mean, first things first, I think I agree with 23% that said the Clippers, but I think that's a homer pick for me and you both who want to see our team win. Given I think we are pretty much solidified as the deepest team in the NBA on paper, roster-wise, and I think if we put it together this year, we can make something happen. But of all the teams you said, I will not be surprised if any of those teams end up taking it at the end of this season. I think the Bucks getting the most votes does not surprise me at all because bias aside, if I don't think the Clippers win, I do think the Bucks have the best chance because, I mean, I think if Chris Middleton never got injured last year, I think the Warriors might not have been celebrating. So that's my take on it. I don't know if you agree with me or not.
I do agree with you that if Chris Middleton didn't get injured, I feel like they would have beaten the Boston Celtics. Not to take anything away from Boston because they played well, but Drew Holiday really struggled in that series. It might not show on the box scores, but he really struggled shooting the ball, as well as the entire team outside of Giannis. It was literally Giannis and everyone else behind him that really struggled. And so I believe if Chris Middleton is out there, I think they would have won that series in 6 games. And I think they would have given the Warriors a very challenging series. Not saying that Boston didn't either, but I felt that the Bucks could match up very well against the Warriors in the finals. And I mean, Draymond Green would have I wouldn't say he would struggle, but he would have a tough time trying to guard Giannis, as well as the Warriors team, and trying to scheme against that. But I wouldn't say for the rest of the percentages, Golden State at 25%, I'm not surprised by it because of the simple fact that they are the defending champions. But I would say that this year is going to be one of the tougher years to repeat, and we haven't had a repeat champion since the Warriors. I'm going too far back. Since the Warriors back in 2017 and 2018. And so it's going to be and those years, those were the Kevin Durant years. So if we really don't count those, I mean, we're going back to probably, and if we don't count the big three Heat either, we're going back to the Los Angeles Lakers with Kobe and Powell. as the last repeat champions in a tough conference that wasn't like over the top, where a team wasn't like over the top favorites. So it's one of those things where the Warriors can repeat. It's just going to be super challenging with all the conferences, with both conferences being stacked. And I mean, obviously, the Clippers. Nothing more needs to be said. That's our favorite team, as we already know. And so the Clippers, I mean, we just have a lot of pressure, and we have to capitalize on it this year, because if we don't this year, it's going to be an interesting offseason with full of talking points from the media as well as the TV shows on the TV shows. So it's going to be interesting. And Boston, I mean, Boston, they have a better team this year, but it's just they have to have a lot of improvements between Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, because the way they played in the finals last year didn't get it done, in my opinion. Even though actually they lost in 6 games, but they didn't have the stat sheet might show that they played well, but if you were watching the games, they struggled offensively. So
And I think
um
with back to your point with Boston, I do think they got better offensively with Malcolm Brogdon being kind of like a coming off the bench and playing a role that he's probably going to star in for Boston. They could, make a run this year, but I think losing their coach um, might hurt them a little bit. I mean, I don't think we got to talk about the whole situation about what went down, but Boston Celtics have a different head coach coming into this season, not by choice. But I do think it might hurt them just a little bit. But I'm sure, I mean, their roster is deep enough and they're all like, I mean, they made a run at the finals last year, so I do not doubt that they could do it again.
Glad you did mention the coach thing. I mean, I was debating if we should make that a topic in itself, because all of the more information is out, but I'd rather keep that private. Like, I mean, I don't think, in my opinion, it should have came out, and the way it was like reported by Woj and Shams early on, it did a lot of damage to innocent people. So that's how I feel about it. But I have my feelings, but I'm gonna just keep those to like my Instagram and Twitter. But I'm glad you did mention that they do have a new coach, because I don't think the success early on, I don't think, is going to be as good as it could be if Ime Udoka was actually there. Moving on to I'm going to go to the second question, and we're going to actually, some of these are like super simple, so we're going to talk about the questions that are like more intriguing than others, so we're not going to actually run through these. But second question is, who will win the 2022-2023 Kia MVP? 48% of GM said Luka, 34% of GM said Giannis, 14% of GM said Joel Embiid, and 3% of GM said Stephen Curry. What is your thoughts on these percentages?
I'm with Luca. He's my pick for MVP this year, and I think, um, it's about time that Luca is finally going to win one. I mean, I think the past couple of seasons, there's been a lot of talk of, him being one of the early front runners in MVP. But, his numbers are obviously there, and I think team success is the only thing that's holding him back. And I think we can get to this later, but I do think the roster that they put around him this year is better than they had last season, and he took that team to the conference finals last year. So I do think if Luca has team success, which I think that they will have this year, and he puts up numbers like he always does, that he will be a favorite for MVP. I think voter fatigue is going to set in, which opens up an opportunity, more of an opportunity for him to win it this year than years past.
I agree with you. I mean, considering where we do have him in our and where we do have the Mavericks in our conference predictions, it's gonna be a little bit hard. But I do believe that he has the necessary talent to win an MVP this year. And as you said, voter fatigue. You have Giannis. It's gonna be kind of not impossible, but hard because he is a back to back MVP along with Jokic, who's a back-to-back MVP. And I wouldn't necessarily count Joel Embiid out of the race, but because he's playing with James Harden and he's going to have a full season of James Harden, and that team is a favorite to win the Eastern Conference or one of the favorites to win the Eastern Conference, I would say that is necessarily against him a little bit, but I do believe that Luka, considering what he's done to his body this off season training wise, he looks a lot slimmer and looks more motivated than ever to lead the Dallas Mavericks to back to the Western Conference Finals. And I do believe that he is, in my opinion, the favorite to win the Kia MVP award this year. Do you want to do the if you were starting? Well, no, everyone really does that one. So we'll actually I'm gonna just go through the list. Um. Oh, this is actually an interesting one because I'm actually curious to see what you're gonna say. Who is the best shooting guard in the NBA? 45% of the GM said Devin Booker, 28% of the GM said Luka Doncic, and 17% of the GM said Stephen Curry. Also receiving votes was Bradley Beal from the Wizards, James Harden from the Sixers, and Jason Tatum from Boston. What are your thoughts on that, ranking wise? And I'm
Well,
assuming, sorry to cut you off. I'm assuming that this is based on last season.
yeah, I think the first thing I was going to say, there's obviously ambiguity within positions in that survey. If you watch the Dallas Mavericks, I want to say with almost 100% confidence that Luka Doncic is not a shooting guard by any means. He has the ball in his hands pretty much exclusively for that team, and every time he gives the ball up, it's going up in the air. It's an assist or a miss. They're catch and shoot. So I think Luka Doncic is not a shooting guard, even to last year's standard, and that also goes for Jason Tatum. I don't even think he's ever played guard in uh, the years he's been in the NBA. I think he's been a forward, 3-4, probably more four than three. If we're gonna, talk about specific positions and not just guard and forward. But that's the first thing I'm gonna say about, the whole shooting guard, best shooting guard in the league thing. And then on top of that, who are you considering not a shooting guard? Because a lot of people like to call Paul George a shooting guard too, and a lot of people like to say he's the best shooting guard too. And then others, whoever you're talking to, wherever your source is, says that Paul George is a three. And I don't think you could argue either way, just because Paul George is that versatile of the player within the Clippers system. But uh, to last season, I do think that Devin Booker was the best shooting guard in the league, just because I think, if we're calling Paul George a shooting guard, although I would want to say that he was more a three than a two last year, in the absence of Kawhi. But I do think Devin Booker, just because of team success, and the numbers he put up, and uh, he just continued to show that he was top three, without a doubt, top three. You can't deny that he's a top three shooting guard at this point in time. And I might be a little biased because Devin Booker's, one of the guys I've been watching for a long time and I've been a fan of for a long time. And, his all stars up until this point were replacement all stars, which, depends who you're talking to, count as all stars or don't count as all stars. But I think he's finally getting the recognition he deserves. And I do agree that, according to last season, that I think that Devin Booker is the best shooting guard in the NBA.
I will agree with you. If this is based on last year's ranking, last year's season, then Devin Booker is the best shooting guard in the NBA. As you know, Carlos, you already know I'm a big Paul George fan, and in my opinion, without bias, in my opinion, he is considered the best shooting guard. But because he played, I think, only 31 games last year, it makes sense that he's like not in this ranking. But Devin Booker was a top 10 MVP candidate, and he led the Suns to a 63-win season, if I'm not mistaken. But they had 60 wins, even though they did have a little bit of a blunder in the Game 7 and Game 6 of the Western Conference semifinals. I mean, Devin Booker led this Phoenix team to the best record in the NBA by a mile too, and also he played at a very high level offensively and defensively. So the best shooting guard question is really good. It's really interesting, but as you said, like Luka Doncic being a shooting guard when he's naturally a point guard, in my opinion, is kind of crazy. And then also like everyone else on this list is kind of interesting too. Like Bradley Beal received votes even though like he played less games than Paul George, which makes no sense. And then James Harden played more games as a point guard than as a shooting guard. And then Jason Tatum, as you said, doesn't even play shooting guard. He plays the 3 and the 4. And I remember, and you brought that point up, which is interesting because I don't know if you listened to or watched the interview he did with Taylor Rooks, but he was talking about how like guys lose money on the All NBA selections because the media puts certain players as a shooting guard rather than their actual position. And I feel like that is just we there's something needs to be done. As I've said for the longest, it needs to be positionless because like last year you had I believe that Nikola Jokic was the best center, even though he won MVP. But I believe that he was the best center. But I mean, there is an argument to be made that you could have Nikola Jokic and Joel Embiid last year as a 4 and a 5 in the All NBA first team selections because they were just that good. And so I believe that the whole the best position thing, we have to do it by, and as hard as it is, we have to classify these players at their position based on how many minutes they play at that certain position and a bunch of other things that have to go into it because as Tatum said, guys lose money on on being ranked in the wrong position, and we just have to change that.
Yeah, and I'm with that, and I think the whole positionless thing is something that I've been thinking about for a long time now, and we've spoken about this on previous podcasts. But I think like an easy fix to this, if you really don't even want to make it completely positionless, is get rid of the whole two guards, two forwards, one center thing, and I think it should be two guards, two forwards, and a guard slash forward to fill that fifth spot. And I say forward in the sense of like forward slash center, the way they do in the All Star when you're voting for your front court and back court players during an All Star game. I think that would help. I don't think it completely solve the issue, but I think it would help in the sense that like All NBA first team last year, I agree with you. Joel Embiid probably should have got it, maybe over Jason Tatum if you want to argue that, or Giannis. I mean, either way, hard argument, but I think Joel Embiid definitely deserves that first team All NBA spot, and having two centers or quote unquote center slash forwards would help that case a little bit. But that's not for me to decide.
I agree. We can move on to the next list, which is actually the best. The next two questions are going to be interesting to get your opinion on. First, we can start with who is the best defensive player in the NBA. 48% of the GM said Giannis. 24% of the GM said Draymond Green. 10% of the GM said Rudy Gobert. And then also receiving votes in this question were Bam Adebayo, Drew Holiday, Kawhi Leonard, Ben Simmons, and Andrew Wiggins. What is your take on the top three defensive players in the NBA, but also you can include receiving votes and who you think should have been at least received a vote out of those names that are on that list?
I know what you're trying to get at right here, and I'm gonna say Marcus Smart deserves a vote. If you're gonna give him Defensive Player of the Year, how does he not get any votes for, the award he won? Which makes zero sense. He should at least have a couple votes. But um, that's a very very tough question for me because um, I think Drew Holiday defends at an incredibly high level. But, he doesn't really guard against bigs, not by his choice, but just because it's what he's suited for and he doesn't have to switch on to bigs at all or anything just because, Giannis Antetokounmpo is behind him. And that goes the opposite way. If Giannis is playing on the perimeter, he does it, I would say that more than Drew Holiday plays down low. But, um, I think that needs to be considered when talking about the best defender, and that goes to versatility. Um, and to that, I want to say, dang, this is hard, man. I want to say that Giannis is the best defender in the NBA, but it's not by like a long shot. I think it's super close. I think you can argue I would argue Drew Holiday is one of the best defenders in the NBA. I would also argue Bam Adebayo is a fantastic defender. Marcus Smart, Rudy Gobert. If you want to strictly talk about what they do on the defensive side and how good they do it, um, it really just depends what you're talking about. But if I was to give you a single answer, I would say Giannis.
No, I agree with you, bro. Like Giannis is the best defender. We've seen him guard 1 through 5 in the regular season as well as the playoffs. I mean, we saw him guard at least Chris Paul for I want to say a, multiple quarters in the finals. And he did a very good job. Maybe even though Chris Paul was possibly injured, I mean, we don't need to get into that, but I mean, we saw him guard like Chris Paul at a very good rate. Also, Draymond Green, what he did in these past finals, I mean, say what you want about him and the antics and the fact that he doesn't shoot the ball or offensively, his offensive game isn't the greatest. I mean, he is the Warriors' anchor on defense, so I agree that he should get 24, maybe not 24, but high teens, low 20s is a perfect percentage for him. Rudy Gobert at 10% is very intriguing, but as you already noted, the fact that I wanted to get into is that Marcus Smart and Mikal Bridges, who were the people in the top two players in the defensive player of the year race last year aren't even on this list. And guys like not Bam Adebayo, Ben Simmons and Kawhi Leonard, who didn't even play last season, are on this list. It just goes to show that like, what are we basing the best defensive player of the year on? As I said, with the shooting guard position last year, is it based on like players on their like over their career, or is it based on like last season? Because I don't know how we can say Luka is a shooting guard last season when he didn't play shooting guard last season. And Marcus Smart and Mikal Bridges, who were the top two players in the Defensive Player of the Year race, don't even end up on this. Don't even end up as a vote, receiving a vote in this question. So it's just, what are we ranking these players on? And as you said, best defensive player of the year, our best defensive player is subjective because I mean we could have perimeter. It could be based on perimeter players, or it can be based on players who anchor their defense, like a Giannis, like a Rudy Gobert. So I mean, it just comes down to preference. But as I said, I wanted to ask you this question simply because how do you not have the top two defensive player of the year candidates in this question as they didn't even receive a vote?
And Andrew Wiggins got a vote.
That too. But I mean, Andrew Wiggins did play his behind off in the finals, so I could understand why he got that vote.
Nah, I understand it too. I just think Marcus Smart and Mikal Bridges been, my fault. I didn't even say Mikal Bridges, but they've been playing uh, to the same level, if not higher, the entire season, playoffs included. But you said it. You said it very well about how are we even voting and ranking these players. But I guess we'll see from next year's survey.
I mean, for the coaches, and that's true. But moving on to the coaches section, I mean, we're just going to get into two of these. Who is the best head coach in the NBA? 52% of the GM said Eric Spoelstra. 22% of the GM said Steve Kerr. Tied for third with 7% were Greg Popovich and Monty Williams, and 5% of the votes went to Ty Lue. Also receiving votes were Coach Bud of the Bucks and Coach Jenkins of the Grizzlies. But I want to get your take on this because I have my thoughts on the top two, and I think that's right. But I don't know where we get Greg Popovich. And as I said, does this go back to last season, or are we talking about a full body of work? But you can give your thoughts.
Um, I do think Eric Spoelstra is the best coach in the NBA in this moment. I just think of the I know that they didn't make a finals run last year, but the consistent success he's been having with at least his roster on paper not being the absolute greatest, still coming out with wins and getting stops when they need to on the defensive side and getting buckets when they need to on the offensive side. I think uh, just the schemes that they run on in Miami, he deserves the number one coach spot. But yeah, Greg Popovich is that's pretty crazy. I could see the vote though, like saying, you know what, I'm gonna give my respect to Pop. Let me just vote for him there. Um, I do think Ty Lue needs to be considered in the best coach conversation for sure, just because um, the success of the Clippers, even without their two-star players, and they're still um, getting wins. No one really thought the Clippers would be on anything uh, last season without our, one and two guys, but we still found our way in the play-in and not 9 or 10. I know we fell in the game, but it's one game; it's a different story. But the fact that the Clippers were able to have that much success in the first place, I think, is credit to Ty Lue.
I agree with you on the fact that the Clippers we did the best we could even without Kawhi, but especially without PG. Him missing, what was that? What did I say? He played 31, so he missed like 49 games. 49 him missing 49 games or 52. I'm bad with math right now because it is 10:52. But moving on, him missing all of those games and us still like being in the plane like as an 8 seed is talks to the talent of Ty Lue. He was able to rally the guys, especially if you don't remember the comeback in Washington against the Wizards, where we came back. I think we were down like I want to say high 20s, if not low 30s. And it ended with a Luke Kennard game winner. And the fact that was supposed to be at that game, but I had something to do. I mean, it just speaks to the talent like of Ty Lue and him being able to rally the troops when the main guys aren't there. And even in my opinion on the question and the results, I do believe that Eric Spoelstra is the best coach. As you said, he does the best he can and gets the best out of his players, even though like his roster isn't as talented as, let's say, a Golden State or a Phoenix or a Clippers team, right? But he gets the best out of guys out of his roster and guys that most fans and casual or not casual don't even really know. Like he got the best out of Max Struess. Like, did a lot of people know who Max Struess was? Like, probably not.
Still
And
don't know who he
so
is.
probably not. So he is able to get undrafted guys or guys who have been in like the G League or like overseas for a long time, and he gives them a shot to prove themselves on the team and gives them great minutes, and they provide great minutes in return. So I do believe that he is the best coach in the NBA. I would say the 52% is a little bit high. I would go maybe low 40s just to balance it out. I do believe that Steve Kerr is second, and I would say that Monty Williams and Ty Lue would be the top four. Greg Popovich at three, I mean, as I said, is it this based on last season or a full body of work? Because we can arguably say Greg Popovich might be the best coach of all time if we're being honest. But if we're going on last season, Greg Popovich, in my opinion, is not third on this list. And so it's just the top four of the top five names are great, are perfect. It's just I believe that Ty Lue and Monty Williams deserve way more recognition than they actually got.
Agreed, 100%.
So moving on to, I mean, the manager motivator, it makes sense. So we're not gonna go there. Best in game. Oh, here we go. I was gonna do the best in game adjustments, but we'll actually go on uh which head coach runs the best offense because this is actually an interesting one. So question, which head coach runs the best offense? 62% of the vote went to Steve Kerr, which is kind of obvious when you look at it. 14% of the vote went to Chris Finch, and tied for third was Coach Bud of the Bucks and Coach Nurse of the Raptors, and also receiving votes were Rick Carlisle from the Pacers, Taylor Jenkins from the Grizzlies, and Monty Williams from Phoenix. What do you think about these results? Because I already see one name who I'm not even going to get into because he's our coach. But what are your results, or what are your thoughts on the results?
I mean, I feel like Steve Kerr and the Warriors is pretty much a given. I know in the survey they also said best offense and like most efficient offense, something like that. But those votes are obviously skewed when you have the greatest shooter of all time on your team, healthy, at prime form of him too. So that's kind of a tough one to argue against. But yeah, Steve Kerr for sure. I think Monty Williams should have got a little more votes for the offense that they run in Phoenix. I mean, Devin Booker was putting up numbers, and he got the best of what he could out of the rest of the guys, and finding success offensively throughout the entire season. They're a great regular season team, and they didn't put up they weren't the greatest on offense. I mean on defense, sorry. And I think when you think of that team, you think of offense. You think of Chris Paul in the pick and roll with DeAndre Ayton. You think of Devin Booker and ISOs on the mid range. You think of your corner threes, Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, Jay Crowder. I don't know. I just think he should have got a little more votes than, not top three for that fact. I think Taylor Jenkins is another one that I think probably should have been a little higher in my opinion, just because Memphis. I just love the offense they run in Memphis. They put up numbers and they get the best out of guys that probably won't score or get the ball as much as they would at anywhere else. And again, they produce wins. But I think those three guys, I want to call it that they would be my 1, 2, and 3. Ty Lue, I mean, we could save it. This isn't a Clippers podcast.
I mean, obviously, we both agree that Ty Lue should be on this list. Even just last year with the offenses he was running, we were still like in above league average in terms of scoring and just running offense and getting the best out of the players he had. So I believe that Ty Lue should be higher. He should have at least received votes, but I'm not going to hold it against it. But I mean, like Nick Nurse receiving votes, and I mean, I watched a little bit of Toronto games, and like Nick Nurse being tied for third and getting votes over like Amani Williams or Taylor Jenkins is kind of absurd to me. So that is just really odd. I mean, we're all in agreement that Steve Kerr having 62% makes sense. I mean, as you said, he has the greatest shooter of all time. And I mean, when you have the greatest shooter of all time that can just like create off the dribble and you can set screens for him and have him just run around and tire out the defense. I mean, it makes perfect sense as to why he receives the most votes for the best head coach and best offense. And so I mean, Chris Finch at number two. I believe in the few Minnesota Timberwolves games I watched, their offense is pretty smooth. Obviously, it's sort of modeled after like a Phoenix Suns where you have D'Lo and Cat running pick and roll, and then Anthony Edwards can either hit mid range, get to the paint, or shoot the three. And I mean, he's a three-level scorer, and he's going to improve as we already know. And so it's just one of those things where that vote of Nick Nurse and I'd say Coach Bud, even though it's to a certain extent, them being tied for three and getting votes over Taylor Jenkins and Monty Williams and Ty Lue is very interesting in my opinion. Let's see what else we got. Which active player? Which team is most fun to watch?
I feel like those are pretty self-explanatory.
Which team is most fun to watch is I'm just looking at the votes. I mean, yeah, those three are actually interesting. Which team has the best home court? Which team has a promising young core? Which player is most athletic? Is fast with the ball. I'm just trying to scroll through these and see if there's any ones that are like actually nope, that's it. That is it. So we can actually get into the next topic, which is the different moves that were made during our hiatus. And I mean, I guess we can get into the Jay Crowder asking for a trade situation. We could just start with that. What is your opinion of that, and where do you think it's gonna go from here after?
Um, I think, I mean, this is hard to say because I feel like the Suns have just been in so much turmoil during, our hiatus, and we don't have to talk about all the things, uh, you know, what happened with the Suns over that period of time. Um, but I think in terms of roster, I think it was time to change something up. Um, just getting your season cut short for the past 2 or 3 seasons with the same exact roster, and you have the aging point guard like Chris Paul and you know DeAndre, DeAndre, and I don't want to talk about all the bad things with the Suns, but I think it's kind of about time that someone asked out, and I would have thought as Jay Crowder. I just hope that the Suns are able to get something in return for Jay Crowder, someone that's going to be valued for them, because I know that Jay Crowder is somehow, some way going to end up on a contending team. Just because, I mean, you see all the teams that have kind of been linked to him with like the Heat and the Mavericks. Those are all, I would call them fringe contenders that, if somehow, some way they end up in the conference finals of their respective conferences, wouldn't be surprised. But if they miss, they don't. And those are both like, I mean, I guess you can call it one piece away type of teams to make some noise in the playoffs. Um, but yeah, I feel like I saw it coming this entire time that if anyone was going to ask how, it'd be Jay Crowder.
I agree. I am surprised that the fact that he wants out is because he wants to start. I mean, in my opinion, that's a little bit selfish because like Cam Johnson probably provides better spacing and shoots the 3-point shot at a higher percentage than Jay Crowder, and also he's like what is he like 26. So I mean they have their core outside of Chris Paul being 36 if I'm not mistaken. Outside of him being 36, the rest of their core is in between 24 and 26, so they have to get those guys out on the floor together to build some cohesion. But so the fact that Jay Crowder wants out because he technically lost his starting spot is a little bit selfish, in my opinion. I mean, as you said, it's not surprising that he's the one that wants out, but he's also the one that is one of the vets on the team. and he's a 3-and-D guy, and Phoenix has basically two of those guys out there who are much younger than him, and they, I would say, play at a better. They're more efficient and play better than he does. So, as I said, I feel like it's a little bit selfish, but you saw the writing was on the wall, and then all the antics of him like saying, "Oh yeah, I'm not coming to training camp," and all of that. I mean, it just, in my opinion, it hurts his stock. And then, as you said, all the teams that are linked to him with the Heat, I think the Heat, the Mavericks, I think the Bucks were on there, and I
I think
want
the
to
Grizzlies
say,
too.
I was about to say, I think the Grizzlies too, because I think John Morant actually had a tweet that said, "We will take you back if you want." Um, but as I said, but as I was watching like KOT4Q's or Kenny for Real's video, and he made the great point, like all of those teams like really don't have much to give up for Jay Crowder in that situation. Maybe you give up like a second round pick and a few players to match salaries, but I mean, is it worth it? And the only real logical place where he would start the only logical place where he would start is Miami, because he's not starting over Jaren Jackson Jr. in Memphis. He's not starting over Giannis or Brook Lopez in Milwaukee, and he's not starting over who was the other person I mentioned? Oh, Dorian
Dorian
Finney-Smith.
Finney-Smith.
There we go.
No, yeah, I
Yeah,
don't
he's
think
not
he's
starting over
starting.
Dorian Finney-Smith, and I don't think you move him to the 3 to get him a starting spot. So it's like, where does he really fit if he really wants a starting spot? And the question is pretty much nowhere outside of Miami. But is Miami willing to give up picks and a few players to get Jay Crowder? And considering that they traded most of those picks in the Kyle Lowry deal, I mean, the answer would be no.
And I feel like you can even argue that he might not even start in Miami given the success Caleb Martin had, and they threw a bag at him too.
Mm-hmm. That's
So
actually that's a good point, because I forgot they actually paid Caleb Martin in
yeah,
the offseason. I guess other players that we could get into that made offseason moves while we were on our hiatus. What do you think about Montrezl Harrell going to the Sixers?
I mean, good for both parties. I think. I mean, Montrez got in a little fiasco with the federal agents in our country, but that's a story for a different day. But for the past couple of years, well, I would think that the Sixers kind of needed a backup, not needed a backup big, but that's kind of the one missing piece I would call it on their roster until Andre Drummond was kind of there. But we all know how that went down with everything. But I think he's going to provide a lot of offensive firepower if he gets the as many minutes, and you know, that Doc gives him the freedom to play how Montrezl Harrell wants to play. He can put up pretty crazy numbers like how he did his Six Man of the Year season. And looking at that 76er bench, I don't know if you're going to get that type of kind of explosive scoring outputs from anyone else coming off the bench except for him. So I think, the dominance of Joel Embiid is pretty much going to eat up the majority of the center minutes, but I think Montrez is not a bad signing at all.
I agree. By the way, if anyone who watches this on YouTube, if I'm looking away, I'm kind of looking at the Bengals game and my fantasy matchup, because I am up by 16. But my matchup and we both have Raiders players playing tomorrow, so I'm looking at the Bengals score to make sure how much I'm gonna be out by the end of the game. But going back to Montrezl Harrell on the Sixers, I think it's a great move for the Sixers. I do wonder if that's going to hinder Paul. I can't remember his
Reed.
last name. Paul Reed. Thank you. I wanted to say Paul Richardson so much, but I couldn't remember. Paul Reed. I wonder if it's going to hinder his minutes. But I mean, Montrezl Harrell is basically there to be the the backup pick and roll guy with James Harden or DeAnthony Melton or Tyrese Maxey, however they want to play it. Because I mean, we all know that Joel probably is going to play 30 to 36 minutes a game. And obviously in the playoffs, he's going to play upwards of like 36 to 40. So, I mean, Montrez isn't going to be the, like, he's going to be the energy guy, similar to how he was in Houston and basically everywhere he has gone. And so I believe that it was a very good move by the Sixers, but it's just going to be interesting where he fits on the second unit and if he's going to be the pick and roll guy when Joel is on the bench with James Harden. But I mean, we'll see. I guess other than that, I mean, we can kind of talk the Blake Griffin signing to the Celtics, but I mean, we kind of know what that's about. But I mean, if you want to give your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's just your plan B after Gallo went down, um, pretty much. And with Robert Williams being out for the beginning of the season, I think they were desperate to sign another big. And I think Blake was a solid signing. I don't think there's a lot of high expectations for Blake Griffin anymore. If he puts up decent numbers at in Boston, good for him. I think he could be uh, the face for why NBA teams need vets. That whole argument that's going around recently. But yeah, I'm not really going to think too much into that one. We'll see how Boston uses him.
No, I agree. Like Danilo Gallinari going down, prayers to him because I believe the Celtics were for sure, in my opinion, for sure, repeat Eastern Conference champions with Gallo there. But I mean,
100%.
with Gallo out and then Robert Williams probably missing the first 2, maybe even 3 months of the season, Blake Griffin is just the backup plan. I mean, they do have what's his name? I can't remember his name. Luke Cornett. They do have Luke Cornett as a backup center, but I mean, do you play him? Do you give him minutes, or do you kind of go small and run Horford at the 5 to start, and then Blake Griffin at the 5 off the bench? I mean, but we'll see. I mean, the Celtics are still, they're not heavy favorites like they were, but I mean, they're still going to be one of those top contending teams up there. But I mean, they just have a lot of I don't want to say issues, but things they have to work out front office wise and player wise too. And is there any other players that I missed?
Uh, I think there's a couple. I think Bojan to the Pistons
Good point.
is one. I think it's good for the Pistons to get a vet like him, and he's been super solid. Like um, during his time in Utah, and I think he can be a nice. The vets they got in Detroit are pretty solid. I think him and Alec Burks can provide some of the vet uh, minutes there, just in terms of scoring, and I would think there's going to be a lot of turnovers uh, in Detroit this year, but I think Bojan and Alec Burks definitely help their case. Uh, I mean, we could talk big time trades. We could talk, the whole Cavaliers trade, but I feel like that one's pretty self-explanatory for everyone, and we can get um, into the Cavs and our thoughts on them later.
Yeah, I agree. The I think we did the Gobert trade, but I think we never got around to recording to do the Murray, the Mitchell trade, but we all know like what that does to the Cavs and what, I won't say contenders, but what that makes them as a playoff team if they're healthy and can stay healthy. We know what that trade does to them and the core that they already have. So it's just that, and the going back to the Bojan trade between Utah and Detroit, as you said, it gives them a vet that has been in the league for a while and provides serviceable scoring and shooting. And I mean, he's going to be. I mean, we're going to speak on this later, but he's probably going to be the starting 4 next to Sadiq Bey and, in my opinion, Isaiah Stewart. But it's just one of those trades that it makes them further the rebuild, but I don't think they're going to be, like, in my opinion, I do think they're going to contend for a playing spot, but I think they're going to fall just short of like the number 10 seed, just considering how good the Eastern Conference is. From if you look at it from 1 to 9, but that they're going to contend for that 10th spot. And I mean, even if they don't even make the play in this season, for them is just going to be a great step in the right direction, considering the draft picks and offseason moves they've already made. And I mean, they're just going to look forward to getting better in the draft next year and then put all the pieces together for the next, I want to say, 2 to 5 years. And I think out of that, did we miss any other trades, or is that it?
Off the top of my head, I think we hit all the ones we really needed to know. I feel like if any other trade, if it's really that much that we need to talk about it, we'll see it during the season, and we'll definitely talk about it on this podcast. But I think we can move on to
Whoa, whoa,
what we
wait,
saw
wait,
in preseason.
wait. We could also talk about Melo and like DeMarcus Cousins not being signed. I feel like
Oh, here
those
we
are
go.
two. I feel like those are two players that it's like the fact that they haven't. Well, DeMarcus Cousins maybe, but the fact that Melo hasn't been signed is actually very intriguing, because like I feel there's a few places where he is needed. His obviously his defense has like never actually been there, but in terms of offense and coming off the bench, I feel like there is a lot of teams, contenders and actual contending, finals contending and just playoff contending teams and fringe contenders that could actually like use him as a very well offensive four, stretch four.
100%. You can throw in Kemba Walker in there too. I think uh, even if Kemba Walker doesn't even get to play at all, I think he can still provide from every place he's ever played at. You never hear anything bad in terms of locker room and leadership from Kemba Walker. So it's just, I don't know. I feel like I'm getting old if Kemba Walker's getting set to retire.
I mean, I just seen a post on Instagram about that. Like he's just waiting by his phone, waiting to see if he gets another spot in the league. And I'm like, it's kind of crazy to think that like a few years ago when he was in Boston, he was like a I want to say a fringe all star if I'm not mistaken, but we're talking about a 19 to 20 point per game scorer, and now out of the league in like, what is that, 4 years? I mean, I'm not gonna count last year with the Knicks as like a year because it was just a bunch of ups and downs, but I mean, like it's been 3 4 years since like we've seen All Star Kemba Walker, and it's like crazy because I remember when he was putting up 20 points on the Charlotte Hornets, and people were like, he's got to get out of there if they're not going to get him any help. So to see him like on the, like, not out of the league but waiting to get a phone call, considering what he can bring as a veteran point guard as a backup, is very interesting. And then moving on to Carmelo Anthony, as I said, there's a lot of teams I feel like that could use a him as a just an offensive guy off the bench. I mean, obviously you've got to play defense as well, but Melo's shown that he's sort of improved as a defender. And as I said prior to our hiatus, I thought the Nuggets would be the ideal spot, but with the move the Nuggets made, I don't think a reunion is in the works. But I mean, I would be happy if it actually did happen, or possibly New York, but it would be interesting to see how that goes.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Kemba Walker is the Hornets' all-time leading scorer.
You know
Might
what?
need to fact check that, but I feel like he's the all-time leading scorer in Charlotte Hornets franchise history.
I'm looking
But
that up
while
now.
George,
Yes.
yeah, thanks for the fact check on that, George. Um, we can move on to what we saw in preseason. I can start off with me. I think the what I enjoyed most in preseason so far is just seeing some familiar, some old faces that we haven't seen in a while. Kawhi. I think is a person, he's he's missed the most time, right, from out of injury. So seeing Kawhi back on the floor healthy is
No, actually,
exciting.
no.
Who's it?
It would be wouldn't it be Jamal Murray? Because Jamal missed like
Oh,
549 days
well,
because he got
Jamal too.
injured. He got injured like late in the season, while Kawhi got injured in the playoffs. So
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Jamal too. I think seeing Jamal hit that three and just the expression on his face is just a cool moment for everyone, like fans included. I am not a Denver Nuggets fan, but just seeing that, you can't help but to like be happy for the guy and for all these guys. I think Zion is someone who I'm super excited to see again. Um, and who was it that he straight dunked on and flexed on him? Was that Isaiah Stewart?
I want to say
Whoever,
yes.
whoever it was, I was like, "Yep, he's back." So I'm excited to see Zion. I think Rui Hachimura, homer pick for me, but seeing him back on the court is super fun to see. And George, I've been pushing this agenda for a long time, but I think seeing John Wall wearing 11 for the Los Angeles Clippers might be my favorite part of preseason.
And doing the Dougie.
Oh,
But 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 I agree with you. Seeing all of those guys back, Jamal, Kawhi, Zion, John Wall, all those guys being back in the league, and my bad, not being back in the league, but seeing them play at a high level again is great for the league. And I believe that Jamal was literally putting up Jamal's always been a all-star caliber. It's just the guard talent in the West has always been loaded, even going back to the early and the mid to late 2000s. The talent guard talent in the West has always been loaded. But seeing Jamal back on the court, I mean, I saw that he got hurt like a few days ago in a preseason game, but he was like, I'm good. And I was like, thank God, because I can't see him like have another injury scare like 2 years ago, sort of, or close to 2 years ago. And then, I mean, as you said, Homer picks John Wall, Kawhi back on the court. I mean, we already know what our team needs to do this season with all the talent we have, but to see them back on the court just makes for exciting basketball. Whether you're a huge NBA fan or you're like you just are getting into the league, or you've been watching but you're not like an actual super fan or an actual fan of the league as a whole. I mean, seeing all of these guys back, it's going to be fun to watch this season, and it's probably going to be the best season ever, barring any injuries.
You hope so, man. I also want to point out, I liked what I've seen in the flashes from Shaden Sharp. I wasn't super high on him coming into the draft, but I think he put up, I want to call it 27. He put up
Yeah,
something. He had a he
27,
had a
27.
he had a good game, yeah, last game, and I like the flashes that I saw for him. So, I might be buying his stock come the start of the season. And I also like not rookie, but I also like what I saw from James Wiseman that first game. I think the Warriors are hiding something special on their bench, and I've been high on James Wiseman and still high on James Wiseman. Super glad they didn't trade him. Um, he looked good, man. He looked good in preseason. Sorry, Porzingis.
Nah, that dunk he did have on Porzingis kind of showed me like James Wiseman, if he stays healthy, he's going to be really good on this Warriors team. And I mean, he's just going to be another screen threat Steph Clay and Jordan Poole can use. So I mean, seeing him back on the court, moving really well. Hopefully, no injuries hurt him. But I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how he fits with this Warriors team, because I mean, he's played a few games in 2 years, but he's always gotten hurt, and it's always like the injury has just been prolonging him. So to see him back on the court, moving the way he did and dunking on Porzingis, sorry, KP, even though I'm in Washington D.C. Um, Seeing him move the way he did in the two Wizards games, and I mean, they just finished playing the Lakers today, so I'm gonna have to catch the highlights of that one. But seeing him move the way he did, I mean, gives me hope that his career is on the right direction, and we'll just see what happens during the season from there.
Yeah, before we keep talking about the Warriors' certain situation, before we get to there, side note, talking about preseason, if you have not watched the Victor Wembanyama 2 games against the G League Ignite, go watch it. That man's insane. You're going to hear a lot of his name throughout the season. For me, especially, I'm big on the NBA draft. If you ever watch these episodes, Scoot Henderson, also the real deal, super smooth on the court. Man's not afraid of anything. Not really NBA related, but just something that I want to point out and has caught my interest recently is Overtime Elite. I'm excited to see what they got this year. I've been sleeping, but I think the Thompson twins are going to be insane. If you haven't watched those 4 guys, watch them. But back to this Warriors situation, George. You want to tell them what happened?
I mean, before we get into the Warriors situation, we could talk about the G League Ignite and the Metropolitan 92s if you want. We can get into that for a bit. Did you watch Tuesdays and Thursdays game, or did you just watch one of them?
I watched the highlights from Thursday, but I watched Tuesday's game.
Okay, so I was able to watch both games in its entirety, and man, I mean we could get into Scoot, but man, if I tell you what Victor Wembanyama is the best prospect I've ever seen in my life, I mean I was only 2 years old when LeBron James got drafted, but looking at Victor Wembanyama, how are you 7'4" and can shoot off the dribble and off the catch as well as he does? Like that man's if there's another mythical creature outside that is higher than a unicorn, what would it be? Because that's what that man
He
is
is
like.
the higher creature. He is the highest creature. And you know what? To Victor Wembanyama, one thing is that not only is he physically, the craziest basketball player we've ever seen in putting up the numbers, I think, going in, how the NBA hyped this entire 2 games up and playing in Vegas and everything. And I think just showing up in the spotlight is so crazy to me. That him putting up the numbers he did, he averaged, 37 in 2 games?
Yeah, 37,
37.
about that.
He had like 36, 11 rebounds, 4 blocks in a game that is probably the biggest game he's ever played in his life. And then he's, iced out with a yellow puffer and shades in Vegas right after. You can't write a more perfect, I don't want to call it perfect, but a probably more ideal NBA superstar, man. He's got oh, I was about to say he's got the chosen one, but I can't say that. But you know what I'm trying to say here.
I mean, Richard Jefferson did say he's the best prospect. Even if LeBron, he even said if Braun was 18 and they were in the same class, he's taking Victor over Braun. Which I mean, in my opinion, it's a stretch, but I mean, it's not the putting them in the same boat when they were like when Victor now and Braun in high school. I mean, it's not hard. It's not hard to not say that Victor Wembanyama could be the best prospect if those two were top two.
I thought that was a crazy take at first, but when I thought about it, I was like, with all due respect, LeBron James is not 7'4".
Yeah, like we've
So
never seen we didn't. I mean, we've seen the Kristaps Porzingises. I mean, Chet. Prayers for him and hopes he makes a full recovery for next year. I mean, we're gonna see Chet and we've seen KP, but there's nothing that like there's nothing we've seen like Victor Wembanyama in our lifetime and in I think anybody's lifetime. The ability to shoot off the dribble, to shoot off the catch. I mean, this man literally pulled from the hash like 30 feet like he was Steph Curry. The ability to be a rim protector, even obviously being 7'4", but to also be able to recover after getting beat by smaller players. I mean, he's just we've never seen this out of a prospect. And as you said, the fact that the NBA made it against the G League Ignite, a 2-game series to hype up the top 2 prospects of this upcoming draft class, and Scoot Henderson and Victor Wembanyama. I mean, it was just a great marketing ploy by the NBA. And I mean, obviously, we're talking about Victor, but I mean, we can get into Scoot. Like, what did you see and what did you like?
First off, Scoot had good games too, but I think, I forgot who I was talking to about this, but I said that there's only a couple players in the NBA that I would call their game smooth. One of them being Paul George, like just making things look so effortless. And Scoot is one of those guys. Just the way he moves is super effortless, and he plays with fire too. Kind of reminds me of an Anthony Edwards type of fire, but a Paul George type of smooth. And he's a point guard, young, doing this at a very high NBA level, which is so crazy to me. And I think Victor gets all the hype, but I think Scoot is a phenomenal prospect as well. If Victor was not in this class, I think Scoot is one.
Hmm. And I
100% one.
and I do believe that like this G League Ignite season and the Metropolis 92 season, how both of them play in their exact season, I mean, it's just going to come down to what team gets that number one pick and where do they want to take that pick? Who do they want to take with that pick? Is it going to be the Spurs and do they take Victor Wembanyama, or is it going to be like a Utah Jazz who have guards already and take Victor Wembanyama? But it's going to come down to what team has the number one pick and who do they want to take it with? Who do they want to take that? Which of the two do they want to take that pick with? And I do believe that Scoot, as I was telling some of my Howard friends, I said Scoot's game is like Derrick Rose, like early Derrick Rose with like John Morant, like not speed, but like the way he explodes off the dribble. Like if
Pace.
you, yeah, thank you. Pace is what the word I was trying to look for. If you remember Derrick Rose, like early, but I mean you will say '09 and MVP year or '08 and MVP year. Those 2 years, like Derrick Rose's mid range was one of the best in the league, and obviously he had the speed to blow by anybody and get to the rim, which Scoot definitely has. But Scoot being 6'2" and having like a 6'9" wingspan is probably arguably better than what D Rose has. The ability to shoot over guys that are taller than him and the ability to pull up from the mid-range area with ease, as you said, like a Paul George whose game is smooth. It just reminds you a little bit of like Derrick Rose, John Morant, and then a little bit of Paul George if you want to add it.
And his jumper is going to be there when he gets to the NBA. You might not think he's there yet, but I guarantee you, once he gets to the league, his three ball will be there, which makes him even more scary.
I'm actually going to look at his stats last season. Scoot averaged in 24 minutes, he averaged 14 points, shooting 40, I'm gonna round up, 44% from the field. His 3-point shot, I mean, is going to improve. He only shot 17%, but he only took 2 attempts. So, I mean, we're obviously going to see that improve this season. And he shot 78% from the field. He turns the ball over 3 times, which is very high for a point guard, as you know, as you would like for that to come down. And then he averages 5 rebounds and 4 assists with almost 2 steals a game. So I mean, he makes up for his turnovers with high activity on the defensive end. And I mean, those numbers are great for a player that's only 17 years old. 17 or 18?
I was going to say, and he was only 17.
Yeah, 17. Okay, yeah, I was about to say 17 last year. He's 18, about to turn 19 next year. But I mean, it's like at those numbers for a 17-year-old, I mean, I'm going to pay attention to the G League Ignite a little bit more than I did like last year. Um but if I believe this year he's going to have the ability to average 20 points in the G League on high efficiency. And I believe that when he gets drafted, he's going to come into the league probably doing probably putting up those same exact numbers because he's already gotten used to playing against NBA level competition and overseas level competition as well. But we can move on to the, um, I guess, conference predictions if you want to go there, because I think that's the last thing on the list. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess I will pull up the screen. Let me just make this smaller and share Chrome tab. Conference predictions. There we go. I mean, let me see. Oh no, expand. There we go. So in our conference predictions, I mean, you can go first before me. Give your thoughts and why do you have those teams where they are?
Okay, so starting off in the Eastern Conference, I have the Milwaukee Bucks. In the one spot, I just think Milwaukee, with the roster they have, is an exceptional regular season team, and I think the success that Giannis will have this season, on top of you're getting Chris Middleton back and Drew Holiday, you're getting a fully, pretty much healthy roster back in Milwaukee. I think is um, just going to solidify them in the one spot, like how I said earlier, that I think if Chris Middleton never got injured, the Bucks could change a narrative. So I have them in the one spot. I have the Celtics in the two just because they made the Eastern Conference Finals. I think in the East they probably made some of the best moves. Arguably with Cleveland, but on paper they're definitely better on paper, and I think I have to give them their respect. So that's why I have them in the two spot for making the conference finals last year. Um, in the three, you're going to see a healthy KD and Kyrie along with Ben Simmons, and I think that's a three-headed monster that is not one to play around with. But I have them in the three spot just because it's still going to be pretty unpredictable. I mean, you saw a little bit of the James Harden Kyrie KD situation that didn't really work out. So just I know they're going to be good, but it's like, how good can they be? If they end up in the one spot, I will not be surprised. And if they fall in all the way to like the playing spot, you kind of scratch your head. But that's when Brooklyn goes full rebuild and everyone asks out. But that's for a different podcast. In the fourth spot, I got Cleveland. They made the Donovan Mitchell trade. Their roster looks absolutely fantastic. I love what they got going on there. I think, um, him and Darius Garland are a dangerous backcourt not to be played around with, while Evan Mobley and Jared Allen hold it down on the defensive side. And you have very good vets of Kevin Love and Ricky Rubio coming off your bench. So I think that that roster, and they're building something special in Cleveland. But I still have to give my respect to who I have above them. I know George has them in a different spot, but I'll let him say his side to that. In five, I got the Sixers, just because they might be the favorites to walk out, but I do think it is very much dependent on the jumps that Joel, James Harden, Maxey, that they can all bring, and all healthy and everything. But I just think that the East is very top heavy. In these, at least these 1 to 5 spots. I think honestly it can go either way. I just have them in this order. Six, I got the Raptors. I'm not going to say too much about the Raptors. They were in the 4 spot last year.
Yeah. No, the
Yeah,
Raptors were
or five.
five. Five.
I know them and Philly were the 4-5. But I think they can repeat the same amount of success while a couple of the teams in the East get a little better than last season. The Hawks at 7, we can talk about, because I would think we have them a little lower than consensus would uh, about the Atlanta Hawks. But I'll get to that when you say what your thoughts on the Hawks and where you have them. The Bulls at 8, I just think that not going to have Lonzo is going to hurt them in the long run. Their roster is a little better on paper, but I just think the East got way better. The East just got better as a conference, and I don't think Chicago can produce the same amount of success as they did last season, even though they kind of took a hit kind of towards the end of last season. But we'll just talk about the top 8. 9, I have Miami. 10, Washington. 11, New York. 12 Charlotte, 13 Indiana, 14 Orlando, and 15 I got the Pistons.
I mean, just to I mean, we both have the Miami at nine, which is very surprising. But why do you have them at nine?
Like I said earlier, I just feel like all these teams above them got better for the most part. I think um, Miami didn't really produce as well as they probably should have or was expected to last season. And I just think in the regular season, I don't think they're going to get as many wins. I do think, say they're in the play-in, I do think whoever they go up against, I would take the Miami Heat to take their spot if they're in a one-game elimination, just given their track record um, and playoff success. But I just feel like in the regular season, uh, I feel like there's too many question marks, so I put them at nine. Then like the more solidified teams, I would say, like the Bucks, the Celtics, and the Hawks even.
All right. I mean, I guess that leads into to me while I'm trying to figure out if my report was what I said was actually true, because that's how like intrigued I am by it. But we'll move on. I have the Cleveland Cavaliers at one. I do think with the steps they took in the offseason with the Donovan Mitchell trade and Ricky Rubio coming back, Ricky, their starting five of Garland, Mitchell, Okoro, Allen, and Mobley, that starting five, in my opinion, is possibly could be one of the best in the Eastern Conference, if not the best. And I mean, they have a bench that includes Karis LeVert, um, what's his name, Ricky Rubio. I can't remember who they're gonna play at the three. I want to say it's probably gonna be like Dean Wade or
Chetty
or
Osman.
that's true, Chetty Osman too. And then, I mean, the four and the five, they'll fill out. I want to say Robin Lopez probably plays the five, if anything, but they'll probably keep Allen or Mobley on the court at all times. But I have them at the one just because of the Donovan Mitchell trade. That puts them in sort of a win now type of mode, and and all of their core pieces are young. So as I said, it puts them in the win now mode. At number two, I have the Philadelphia 76ers, for obvious reasons. Joel and James Harden. We get to see a full season of them, hopefully no injuries. We get to see a full season, and I do believe that, as we mentioned earlier, Joel Embiid is going to be a perennial MVP candidate. And if James Harden slimming down and losing 40 pounds, if that helps him and he gets back into MVP, like MVP 2021 James Harden when he was in Brooklyn, then I mean the Philadelphia 76ers become a super talented team. And the additions they made of PJ Tucker, DeAnthony Melton, who else am I missing? What's his name? Daniel House, along with having Tobias Harris and keeping Tyrese Maxey. I mean, they're going to be one of the best teams in the Eastern Conference. Boston Celtics, as we already mentioned, they have their core pieces of Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. Marcus Smart, Defensive Player of the Year winner last year. Can they manage to keep up in the Eastern Conference, in a better Eastern Conference, without Robert Williams holding down the paint? I do think Malcolm Brogdon leading that second unit is going to be very intriguing, because I think oh well, we'll get into lineups after, but potential starting lineups after. But I do think that Malcolm Brogdon leading that second unit is going to be a huge boost for them. And I mean, I'm not going to be surprised, because the Celtics were one of the worst teams to start last season and they ended up making the finals. So not going to be surprised if they have a slow start this season and end up rebounding like they did last year. The Milwaukee Bucks, nothing needs to be said. I mean, this is a team that won a title in 2020, right? Or is it
21.
2021? 21. Okay, I'm losing my mind here. 2021. Giannis obviously going to be in the MVP race. Drew Holiday, Chris Middleton, we know what they bring to complement Giannis. Brook Lopez, we're going to see hopefully a full season, even though he is getting older. And so I do want to see what the bench look like, because they don't have. I don't know if George Hill is still there, but they do have like Javon Carter and
Bobby
Wesley
P.
Matthews, Bobby Portis. So the bench is good, but can they get production out of the bench? Because as we know, their main scoring it basically comes from Giannis, Middleton, Drew, and then Bobby Portis, Grayson Allen, or Pat Connaughton can have that night where they average or where they provide 15 plus points. So I mean, it's just going to be interesting with the bench to see where they fall, to see where they end up. I have Brooklyn at number 5, and that was only because I'm not sure where they're going to be in terms of front court wise. Like, yes, the goal is to obviously have Ben Simmons play the 5 at some points in the season, but it's sort of like they don't really have any depth after Nicholas Claxton. So it's like, what happens if they play a team like the Philadelphia 76ers and Joel Embiid? Like, Joel's going to be out there, and I'm talking in the playoffs. Joel's going to be out there playing 38 minutes. Do you think Nicholas Claxton is going to be able to hold his own for at least 38 of those minutes? Probably not.
You
And
put
they
Ben
don't have
Simmons on him for the views.
that would be an intriguing matchup in the playoffs. Not gonna lie, that would be great TV. But I mean, we're gonna get to see a full season of Kyrie, Kevin Durant. Hopefully, no injuries, full season. We know what those two bring to the table, and this is a very important year, not only for this team, but for Ben Simmons coming back from his injuries, coming back from all the drama that happened in Philly after that Game 7 loss to Atlanta. I mean, this is just a big year. And as he said on the JJ Redick podcast, I'm just ready to hoop and get back on the court. And so, as this is going to be a big year for this team, I have them in the 5th seed because of the talent they have. And I think they made additional pieces in TJ Warren and Royce O'Neal to provide some floor spacing and some defensive aspects in the front court. And I mean, you're going to have Seth Curry and Joe Harris on the wings as well at the 2 spots. So, I mean, this team has the offensive talent. It's just, can they hold their own defensively? And I mean, 5th spot for them is actually really good, in my opinion, but maybe they end up higher, maybe they end up lower depending on injuries, but who knows. Atlanta, I have at 6. They had a very injury riddled season last year, and so I believe that Trae Young, DeJounte Murray, if that tandem can work where DeJounte is playing the 2 and he improves his 3-point shooting, then I believe that they're going to be a 6th spot. Hopefully DeAndre Hunter continues to improve and he's not as injury prone as he has been the last 2 seasons or 3 seasons. But you're looking for him to improve immensely offensively. You know what he brings defensively. John Collins is going to have to show that he's worthy of being an all-star candidate, considering the money they paid him. And so that's going to be another thing. And then, I mean, I think their bench is still pretty solid, but it's not a top like 5 bench compared to the other benches that all the other top 5 teams in my list have. And so we'll move on to number 7. I have the Toronto Raptors. I mean, obviously we flipped ours, that you have Atlanta at 7 and I have Toronto at 6. I just have the Toronto Raptors there because what is this team going to look like outside of the starting 5? Like, the starting 5 played heavy minutes last year, and I mean, it didn't really show obviously in the postseason, but with the conference being improved compared to last year, can that 7-man or 8-man rotation that the Raptors played last year, I don't think it's going to hold the same weight as it did last year, in my opinion. Hopefully Scotty Barnes takes a huge leap in terms of scoring. We know that I think he averaged like 17 or 18 last year, if I'm not mistaken. And I mean, can Siakam hold his own at the 5? Like, that's just going to be the interesting thing, in my opinion. And can Gary Trent also provide more scoring? Because we know what he is as a 3-and-D guy, but he's going to have to show that he can score the ball a little bit more. And then I have the Chicago Bulls at 8. And I mean, a lot of people are going to probably ask why, but I mean, Lonzo's injury with his knee, I mean, unless like it just heals out all of a sudden, like I don't see this team going anywhere unless Vooch takes a step defensively, because they're not the best defensive team. I mean, their best perimeter defender is obviously Alex Caruso when Lonzo's not there. But we saw last year when Lonzo and Caruso were on the court, not even together, but when they were just on the court and Lonzo was on the court in general, this team was a great defensive unit just because Lonzo was able to guard the perimeter and he allowed everyone to buy in defensively. And the defensive aspects of the team started and ended with him. So when he's not there, it's like Caruso gets thrown onto the best perimeter player, and at times, even when they played the Bucks, he was guarding Giannis, and I just don't think that's the best recipe. Now, I will say that Zach LaVine didn't play a lot of games last year just due to injury, and I think he also had the virus as well. But I just don't see this team with the talent that the other teams in the conference made and acquisitions they made. I just don't see this Bulls team as like a top 6 team, so they'll just be in the play-in. At 9, I have Miami. As you said, maybe they end up cool. All right, I'll finish this then, unless he ends up joining back. But he's lagging heavy right now, and I mean, I'm literally it's literally 12:04 in the morning as we're finishing this. But if he can't come back, I'll just finish. And so going on, at 9 I have the Miami Heat, and that's just due to all the talent and acquisitions all the other teams made. I mean, Bam Adebayo's goal was to take more shots. And so, I mean, maybe he develops a mid-range game and also possibly a three-point shot. But I mean, I just don't think this team has the ability to compete with all the other teams in the Eastern Conference, considering all of the acquisitions they made. And then to round out the last 6 teams, I have the Wizards at 10, and they're just one of those teams where it's like they're talented, but it's like all the other teams in the Eastern Conference got better. But I mean, the Wizards last year were like they were a top 4 or 5 team before Bradley Beal went down. So I mean, they can hold their own, and if Bradley Beal can stay healthy, then they've really got a shot to make it to the playoffs and not even be the 10th seed. At 11, I have the Knicks. I just think that it's weird because the Knicks making the playoffs in 2020 it was different, but reality set in last year, and I just don't think this team has enough compare with the talent that was made in the Eastern Conference, the talent that was or the talent acquisitions all the other Eastern Conference teams made. I just don't think Jalen Brunson is going to be enough to get this team back into playoff contention and even play-in contention. So that's just where I lie with the Knicks. 12, Detroit, as I mentioned earlier, I think they're going to be in a potential like play-in scenario where they're going to contend for the play-in. But other than that, I don't think I have them anywhere higher than that. And then 13, Indiana. 14 Charlotte, and the reason why I have Charlotte low is because it's LaMelo, Terry Rozier, Gordon Hayward. I mean, like that just isn't going to get you enough compared to the top 10 teams in the Eastern Conference. So I have them very low. And so, and then to round out, I have the Orlando Magic. I just think the Magic, they have to figure out what they're gonna do on the front court side of the ball, because they have guards and Cole Anthony and what's his name, Cole Anthony and Jalen Suggs. I mean, I do think Terrence Ross is getting traded this year, if I'm not mistaken. But I mean, them having Paulo Banchero, Mo Bamba, and Wendell Carter Jr. I mean, Carlos isn't interested to see how the tall ball lineup works, but I mean, you've just got to make a decision on like which one of those two guys are you going to keep? Are you going to keep Wendell or are you going to keep Mo Bamba? And so that's how I finished out my predictions. And so, I mean, if Carlos comes back, I'll let him do his predictions, but I'll give mine for the Western Conference. At number 1, I have the Denver Nuggets, and that's just because I believe that this team is a 60-win team if Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. can stay healthy. Even if Jamal Murray is the only one healthy and MPJ suffers like an injury, God forbid, I do believe this team can still like be a 50 to 55 win team without MPJ, because they made the necessary acquisitions in the offseason to further their bench, but also get better in the front court. You're going to have a starting lineup of Jamal, KCP, MPJ, Aaron Gordon, and Jokic. And Jokic, without MPJ and Jamal, led this team to 46 wins. So adding those two has to necessarily add like 10 to 15 wins, right? And so that's why I have them at number 1. Number 2, I have the Golden State Warriors. Defending champs, nothing more needs to be said. Yes, they did lose Gary Payton II and Otto Porter, but I mean, they replaced them with JaMychal Green and Dante DiVincenzo. So it's not like those two players can't do what Otto Porter and Gary Payton II did. And I mean, if we get we're going to get to see a healthy Klay Thompson play possibly 82 games for the first time in 2 years. So it's gonna. So I just have that. I have them at number 2. Let me text Carlos because he said I might have to finish. I might have to finish this episode without him. So let me just hit him. At number 3, I have the Clippers. I mean, nothing more needs to be explained on this one. The Clippers are probably going to have nights where PG and Kawhi probably sit, or just Kawhi probably sits for load management. But I mean, this team is too talented to not be a top 3 seed in the Western Conference. So I'll just leave it at that. At the 4 seed, I have the New Orleans Pelicans, and that's just because with Zion coming back and hopefully he plays 82 games, this team literally took the Phoenix Suns without him to a series that not a lot of people possibly predicted. And with Zion coming back and Trey Murphy and Herb Jones improving, I believe that they are going to, and with CJ McCollum there and signing his extension, I do believe that he's going to be leading this team along with Jonas Valanciunas. Those two vets are going to improve this New Orleans Pelicans team and make them sort of a contender. At the number 5 spot, I have the Memphis Grizzlies. I mean, you have Ja, you have Desmond Bane, you have Dylan Brooks. Jaren Jackson Jr. is going to be out, I want to say, for the first month to 2 months, maybe even 3 if I'm not mistaken. But I mean, you have Ja, as I said, you have Jaw, you have Desmond Bain, you have Brooks, you got Danny Green in the trade. You also have Tyus Jones off the bench. Like they have pieces that can provide what is going to be missed from Jaren Jackson. So I have them at number 5. Number 6, I have the Minnesota Timberwolves. I'm just intrigued to see how the whole Cat and Gobert 4 and the 5 how it works. I mean, I'm not going to be surprised if they're like a top defensive team in the Western or in the league, but I'm going to be it's going their success is going to be judged on whether they make the playoffs, and is Rudy Gobert going to possibly be exposed in the playoffs like he has been on like he was on the Utah Jazz. And I did see a report that said Chris Finch is going to play D'Lo and Gobert together, and then he's going to play Cat and Anthony Edwards together for the majority of the minutes. So it's going to be interesting how those two tandems work. And I do believe that their bench didn't get better, but I feel like they can manage it with the starting lineup talent that they have. At 7, I have the Dallas Mavericks. I mean, Luka's going to Luka. That's all I can say. I do believe that Tim Hardaway Jr. is going to have to. Tim Hardaway Jr. and Dorian Finney-Smith are going to need to provide more production because Jalen Brunson is absent, and Spencer Dinwiddie too. He's going to need to sort of go back to the old Brooklyn Nets Spencer Diddy when in what was that 2019? I want to say. I want to say 2019, and so that's where I have the Dallas Mavericks. I do believe that Dallas can make a run to be in the top 6, but it's going to be one of those ones that is going to the talent. I don't think their top end talent matches against what those top 6 seeds are. And I haven't even gotten into the 2 teams I'm about to talk to next, the Phoenix Suns and the Lakers at 8 and 9. These were tough with everything that I have Phoenix at 8 because with everything that's going on, I do believe that Chris Paul's getting older and he's going to need to be a lot more valuable. And I'm talking about my favorite player here. And he has to be a little bit more valuable on the defensive end. And with him getting older, it just means that like guys like Devin Booker are going to have to take like more of that perimeter defender role. I mean, obviously you have 2 guys in Cam Johnson and Mikal Bridges that can guard basically 1 through 4, but Chris Paul is going to. You want Chris Paul to be your facilitator and not be like slow, if you want to call it that, on the defensive side. So I believe that Devin Booker would need to take that role of being if he's going to guard the best point guard or shooting guard, he's got to take that role and just leave Chris Paul to be like more of a facilitator. And the reason why I also have them as an 8 seed is obviously the DeAndre Ayton situation. I mean, the media day thing just didn't look it just didn't sound right and it didn't look right. I mean, obviously the media cut a few of his words from his press conferences and all that out, but when the media reporter asked him about his contract extension, he had like no enthusiasm as to like it just got done. Like, come on, bro. Like it just made it like words and tone matter, and from the tone, it just seemed like he wasn't happy to be. He's not happy to be in Phoenix. Like he's just God. He got the money, but it's like if I wanted it from somewhere else, I would be fine, right? And then obviously, as we mentioned earlier, the Jay Crowder trade situation. And then, I mean, I just don't like the outlook of their bench. Like with Cameron Johnson moving to the starting lineup, I feel that like he was a big reason why their bench was so good along with Campaign. And if he's moved to the starting lineup and Jay Crowder is possibly going to get traded, even though I find it unlikely that it happens, you're going to have to rely on Cameron Payne and Dario Saric when he comes back to be good. I mean, they did make acquisitions in Jock Landell and Josh Okogie and Damian Lee, but I mean, those acquisitions don't really compare to how the other benches in ahead of the Suns look, right? So that's why I just have them at 8. The Lakers, I have them at 9, and I mean, it's just fit wise, like Russ, LeBron, AD can all three. Well, I mean, Russ was healthy for the majority, but can Braun and AD stay healthy? And can they get enough outside shooting from the rest of the role players to be able to contend against other teams, right? So that's why I have them at 9. I almost was tempted to put them at 10 behind the Blazers, but I do think the Blazers, I just don't think they have enough talent roster wise to match against the top 8 teams of the Western Conference. You have Dame, you have Simons, you have Hart, you have Nurkic, you have Jeremy Grant, who you got in a trade, but it's like, I just don't see that being able to compete for a playoff spot. They'll be in the play-in, but they're not going to make the playoffs. And I have Sacramento at 11. Sacramento is a weird situation because they made the trade for Sabonis last year to win now, and they didn't even make the play-in. And I think depending on how Sacramento looks early on in the season, they're going to get rid of De'Aaron Fox. And so it's like, if they look bad to start to by the All-Star break, like De'Aaron's going to go. He's going to ask out, and they're just going to be sort of back in like not even a rebuild phase, but sort of like, where do we go from here? Because we have Davion Mitchell, but like, where is he, like the point guard of our future? Or it's just like, this year is very important for the Kings because it's literally play in or like, where do we go from here? Like, that's literally their season. I have OKC at 12. If I have OKC at 12 pretty much because like, they don't need Scoot and they don't need Victor Wembanyama. So they're not going to go for a top 2 seed. So it's like, if Shea and Josh Giddey and them can stay healthy, then they're going to just be hovering around that 12 to 15 range. And I do believe that like, is Chet's injury is going to be is going to play big, but I do believe it gives a lot of the talent like Jeremiah Robinson Earl, Jalen Williams. I think they no, they don't have Garuba, or do they? I think they do have Garuba, Usman Garuba. It gives those guys the ability to play. Okay, no, Usman Garuba plays for the Rockets. That's my fault. It gives Jalen Williams and Jeremiah Robinson Earl and a few other like front court pieces to show what they are doing, to showcase their ability. And I do believe that OKC is just going to be 12th just because they're not going to tank for a Victor Wembanyama or Scoot. And to round out 13, 14, 15, I have the Houston Rockets, the Utah Jazz, and the San Antonio Spurs. And literally those 3 teams, those are the 3 teams that are going to be tanking for Scoot and Victor Wembanyama. I do believe that if the Rockets are tanking and they don't like where the KPJ point guard project is going, I do believe that they're going to tank for Scoot and try to have him play alongside Jalen Green for the future, because they do have Alperen Sengun that can play the center spot, and Jabari Smith, which they drafted 3 to play the power forward spot. So that's why I have them at 13. Utah, I mean, they just traded most of their guys. They traded Mitchell and Gobert and Bojan, and I do believe that Clarkson and Conley are probably on their way out too. It's just, where can they go and how does money match? So Utah is just hitting the full reset and the full rebuild, so they're going to tank. And then the Spurs literally are just one of the youngest teams in the NBA, and I do believe that they're going to try and tank for Victor Wembanyama. And I mean, Carlos, I mean, he told me he's not going to be back, so I'll just end it there. We can get into in our next podcast. I'll let Carlos do his predictions, and then I mean, we can get into who's going to win what awards this year, and possibly whatever else happens before the season, what other moves are made. But I'm gonna end it here. Hopefully you like, comment, and subscribe on the video or on the audio platforms. We're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. I want to say we're on Google, whatever the Google podcast is, but they're on all audio platforms wherever you listen. And this is episode 16 from the 4 Out 1 In podcast. I'm your host, George Hamilton III. And Carlos, my co-host, says, what's up, goodbye too. And that's it. We'll see y'all on the next one. Peace.